gather in this space today. We come to mourn the loss and celebrate the life of Anna Virginia Dimmel. It is quite appropriate that we gather in this space. I do want to take a bit of time and thank Reverend J.C. Harp and the congregation at First United Methodist for allowing us to be here this morning and to celebrate Virginia's life. Indeed, she and Charles met each other in the second grade Sunday school class here. And so many of you who knew Virginia and Charles through the course of their lives will know how important this congregation and this church has been to them and to their family. There was a lot of family singing at weddings and funerals here. And so if these walls could talk, we'd probably find out even more than we're going to find out already today. So I know that in Virginia's presence, in God's full presence today, she is smiling at all of you who are gathered here. She's smiling for those who couldn't be here today as they are off doing the work that they have, because she certainly was a supporter of that work. And she also is, I think, smiling today because we are gathered to give praise to a God who is creative enough to give us Virginia. And that is one creative God to paint that kind of a life. So we celebrate. The power of God's Spirit brings us into this place that we might know that in God's good and abundant grace there is life everlasting, and that each of us come today to reclaim that promise as we celebrate Virginia's life. I'll invite you to stand as you're able, and if you will find the words to the hymn on the screen. Virginia had all of those. She had times of great celebration and joy. She had times of deep difficulty and struggle. Perhaps it was the greatest struggle for her to hear that her beloved oldest son, Drew, had died this last January. Sometimes there are words that make it hard for us to want to go on. And yet Virginia had lived a full and joyous life. So her passing into God's full presence to perhaps greet Charles and Drew again has brought a new kind of joy for her. Esther's story is one of the few in the Bible that is a whole book that is named for a woman. That was a very difficult thing in the time that the scriptures were put together. Women were not at that time as independent or allowed to be as independent as we are today. And certainly Virginia experienced that in the beginnings of her life, that it wasn't allowed for her to do all the things her spirit probably was just bursting at the seams to do. But perhaps not unlike Esther, Virginia didn't let a whole lot of that stop her from living out what her dream and her vision for her life was. Esther became the queen in this time, in this place, through a beauty contest, as odd as that sounds. The king had dismissed his wife Vashti, and he needed a new wife. And so they spread out through all the land that there would be a beauty contest, and Esther's cousin Mordecai urged Esther to enter. Now understand, Esther is part of a foreign people. They were part of the Jewish folk that were defeated by the Babylonians and exiled in what's called the Great Diaspora. They were dispersed throughout the region, so never again would they come together to be a power. So there's a small group of people living in this region. And so the prime minister sends word out that on this particular day, this foreign people are going to be exterminated. And Mordecai begins to try to get word to Esther, who is the queen, who is loved by the king. Go tell Esther, who knows, but for such a time as this, you've come to royal dignity. And Esther says, okay. Can't you just see your mom? Can't you just see your grandma? There's something that's got to be done. I'm the one to do it. I can probably predict the consequences, but damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Esther says, go back and tell Mordecai to gather all the people together and tell them to fast for me. And I will gather all my servants and all my maids, and we will fast as well. And I will go to the king, she says. I will go to the king. And if I perish, I perish. That's commitment. It's commitment to family. This woman had more gifts and talents than most of us will ever be able to amass in 5 lifetimes. Some of you saw her playing the piano up here. She could play the piano and sing. She also, I'm going to call her a paralegal. I know she was an administrative assistant or whatever, but she worked at law firms for so long, they had her writing their briefs for them because she was brilliant intellectually. She was able to host large groups of people at her home with fine linens and beautiful dinners. And she and her husband gave birth to these three, I don't know, kind of fade into the background children, right? Don't have very distinct personalities, no senses of humor, and gosh, don't ask them to try to do music. Good Lord. Can you imagine raising these three? Seriously. Can you imagine? But I'm going to tell you part of why they are who they are. And yeah, they're gifted and they're brilliant and they're all of the things that they have done in life that have made them successful. But at their heart and at their essence, their mom taught them how to be good, humble, beautiful people from the inside out. You would never know from these people how accomplished they are from their own mouths, unless you get Doug alone and you get him to go, and then he'll, you know. But it was most important, I believe, to her, most important, that they be good people. I think she and Charles agreed on that probably very, very early. And so she did what she could to offer that kind of foundation. And when they need to be reined in, she reined them in. And when they needed to have their spirits renewed and to be reminded that they could soar, she would renew their spirits and convince them once again that they could soar. And she kept a household going. And she played at the Vale Mansion. And she did charity work. And she taught Sunday school at the church. There wasn't too many things she didn't do. She had a modeling school. She had an electrolysis business. Seriously, how creative was this woman? She was an artist and an engineer at the same time. You don't find that very often. And she had a marvelously generous heart for people, most especially for her children and her grandchildren, and her great-grandchildren as well, I'm guessing. You know, a large part of the light of the world was dimmed when she took her last breath. So the part of that wisdom writing from Ecclesiastes that's the hardest is that there's a time to be born and a time to die. But if we don't love much, we don't grieve much. So the depth of your grief is because of the expansive nature of her love for you and your love for her. I want to just end, and Suzanne, I know you said that I didn't really need to read these, but I really want to, so since I have the microphone and you're sitting down for once, I'm going to go ahead. Today at 5:30 a.m., our dear sweet mama passed away. Remarkable in so many ways, she was the reigning matriarch of the Dimmel family and lived over 89 years. Adored by my brothers and me, Virginia Dimmel was my best friend and Mimi to her 8 grandchildren. Eldest grandson, Michael Dimmel, is not in the photo. Evidently set a photo. I didn't get the photo, Suzanne. You can send me that later. She was a mentor, confidant, hostess, musician, pianist, linguist, writer, fabulous cook, dedicated friend, wife, mother, grandmother, volunteer, and an intuitive person of great spiritual faith. We are so thankful for her many wonderful years and the lives she touched. We know today she is reunited with our father Charles and our brother Drew, and her legacy lives on in her grandchildren and 6 great-granddaughters. Godspeed, Mama dear. We love you more than the universe and all of the black holes in space. Only a Dimmel would say that. This is from Catherine Glass, one of her granddaughters. It's difficult to fathom how my life would have transpired without the indelible impact of my dear Mimi, Virginia Dimmel, who passed away this morning. She was the product of bygone age, when choices available to her were limited and her life's trajectory largely prescribed. Nevertheless, limitations and social convention never carried much weight when it came time for Mimi to act. She marched to the beat of her own drum, showing me what it was to be a strong, creative, determined woman who did exactly what she wanted whenever she pleased, all while exhibiting her signature class grace and that heart-stopping smile. Mimi was more than my rock, my confidant, muse, caretaker, and friend. She is the very voice I hear when motivating myself to be brave. when soothing myself after disappointment or celebrating a hard-fought win. She once told me that life is nothing more than a roller coaster. It can be scary, exciting, suspenseful, and invigorating, but the 100 years, and she came close, that compromise a life are a mere 90-second blip on the span of eternity. It'll all be over before you know it, she'd say. So no matter what happens, throw your hands in the air and try to enjoy the ride. Your ride may have ended today, memes, but you can rest peacefully knowing I will carry your memory. Okay, Doug's daughter, is it okay if I read this? I'm going to read this. Is it all right? It's so good. Y'all are so good. My sweet grandma, Virginia Dimmel, passed away this week. There are so many things I want to say, but I'm not sure much of it would do this remarkable woman justice. She was truly a woman ahead of her time, cultured, brilliant, entertaining, full of class, but not afraid to speak her mind. She will forever be a woman I admire. When I search for the courage to speak my mind, spread my wings, and try to tackle barriers set in front of me, I dig deep inside and pull strength from her. I hear her voice championing and pushing me to think past society's limits, culture's limits, and even my own limits. Y'all are raising really smart kids, because she didn't allow those to define her dreams, desires, or accomplishments. She set her mind, and she did. In short, there wasn't much this woman couldn't do, but most of all, she loved, and she loved well. And I was blessed to be one of her own. I love you, Mimi. You'll forever be missed, but your legacy lives on. I love you to the moon and back. A life lived with remembrances like these, or a life lived fully. That's the challenge we've been given. Let's pray. Gracious and living God, we give you thanks for the witnesses of faith that you have given us in our life from the scriptures, from those around us, from those who've gone ahead of us. We ask that you would continue to bless the work that we do and the spirit that we live as we reflect you and Virginia's life in us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
My children and my grandchildren, I think, are the best part of my life. I was an only child. My mother was a piano teacher in our home. My dad was a banker whose bank went under at the time that all the banks were going under. So we moved from Oak Grove, Missouri, up to Independence. And I rode my bicycle all around the neighborhood, up and down hills, and it was right around the corner from Harry Truman's house. And he was the president at the time. I always did secretarial work because I typed so well. Playing the piano as well as I did made my fingers able. And back then, women weren't given executive jobs, so being a secretary to an executive was about the best you could do. So that's what I did. My husband, Charles, transferred into my church. He didn't go to my school, and we weren't in the same Sunday school class because they always separated the girls from the boys. I don't think they do that anymore, but they did then. So I didn't know him up till then. We just kind of knew each other in passing, you might say. I lived close to a friend of his, and that guy wouldn't hardly even speak to me. Dawned on me later, he didn't want Charles thinking that he was getting fresh with me. And Charles had told him that I was his interest. His birthday was the 10th and mine was the 20th. So we were definitely September kids. And we were just 19 when we got married. I got married at First Methodist Church that we both went to. At the very end, when the groom kisses the bride, I remember being kind of embarrassed and grinned and turned my head so he kissed my cheek. ended up kissing my cheek. He was a good man. He didn't drink, he didn't smoke. He wasn't very helpful on the house. He didn't like cleaning, but he was a wonderful husband and a great father. So, how can you ask any more? And he was good looking. So, you can't ask much more from a man than that. My 3 kids, they all turned out so well. Additions to this world. And that's not always the case, you know. So, that's exactly what I'm proudest of. We were 22 when we had Drew. He was very sweet, very helpful. And now, he's my biggest helper. We have a great time. Well, from the word go, he was crazy about Liz. I lived with them 2 years, and I liked Grandview. I thought it was a nice little town. The boys were really into music. When they were little, each had an instrument. Doug was the drummer, and Drew played, well, different things. Drew could play the piano pretty well. Drew also played guitar. They were a good band. Other people thought so too. I was so thrilled. I mean, I really wasn't expecting a third one. And then to get a girl after 2 boys, that was a real treat. I loved that. As she grew, she was very smart, very good in school, and I thought it was wonderful to have a girl that had all these different interests than the 2 boys. We just had a sweet family, I thought. And my husband adored them. He was a little, he wasn't into giving out spankings. He and I always had similar thoughts about the children and the grandchildren, so he'd be just as proud as I am.
Grandsons put that together. There is no lack of talent in this family. That was beautiful. Love is patient and kind. It does not envy or boast. It is not proud. It is not rude. It is not self-seeking. It is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth, always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And now these 3 remain, faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. Amen. I invite you to stand again, and we will sing together, Holy, Holy, Holy. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Thanks for being here this morning. I know we've all been remembering and thinking a lot about Mimi lately, and such an unforgettable person, such a great character. For me, here was someone who was charismatic, talented, astute, as Nanette mentioned, entrepreneurial, perhaps surprisingly intellectual, fascinated with the mysteries of life, but who was very down to earth, always seemingly perfectly happy with her life at home. For Mimi, boiling it down, I think love of her family was what was truly important to her. Look at her almost lifelong devotion to her husband, Charles, support for the classmen, the rehearsals in the basement, the many, many family get-togethers that she happily hosted, and for us grandkids, the sometimes long-term daycare that she provided while our parents were working. I'm sure that was hard, but she always said having us little kids around was the closest thing to heaven that she could imagine. I don't think Mimi cared much about wealth, at least in part because she already had her family. And that was what mattered most to her. I'm glad Nanette mentioned the black holes in space. There is a story behind that, actually. I mentioned the mysteries of life. That was something that Mimi and I shared as kind of a personal connection. When I was about 4 or 5, my own personality as a huge nerd was perhaps already showing a little bit. Mimi encouraged it, and one day she told me all about space, the black holes and galaxies stretching out into the unimaginable vastness of space. I thought it was fascinating. And later when we were saying goodbye, she told me how much she loved me. And I said, Mimi, I love you more than all the black holes in space. And she loved that so much. Little did I know at the time, that's how she would say goodbye to me for the next 32 years. And soon after that, actually, Mimi started a tradition. Every Christmas, she would make us a cassette tape, basically like a book on tape, of her reading about a topic that we found mutually interesting. UFOs or ancient civilizations or the early lives of historical figures. She loved the Now You Know the Rest of the Story, which is funny. Now you know the rest of the story about the black holes. If she were here, she would have loved that setup. And thank you. I can tell you, Mimi actually had a surprisingly compelling narration voice, and these tapes gave us loads of relief on family road trips for years. And so later, when I moved to San Francisco from Kansas City right after college, I found these old tapes, and they were long stored away in a drawer, and I decided to take them with me. I still have them. After that, during that 30-hour drive alone in the car, kind of unsure about what the future held for me, I probably listened to those on the 30-hour drive 15 of those hours, easily. Her voice was an enormously comforting presence to me. And I remember on the second night, at some point, it really kind of dawned on me how my decision to move across the country might affect Mimi. Even more so, now I have a daughter, and I'm sure lots of us have kids as well. I'm starting to realize now how it must kind of hurt to see your descendants move away. And let's not forget, this was the person who years before swore when our family moved just from Independence to Overland Park that her grief would surely prove fatal. Fortunately, she was exaggerating a little bit, maybe. Mimi did call me after I got to San Francisco at least once every other week to ask how I was doing, talk about the interesting things we'd read about, say how much she missed me. This went on for at least the first 3 years that I was there. Whether Mimi herself had maybe grown a little bit, or whether maybe there was just some good trust between us. She never once made me feel bad or guilty about the move. Looking back at a pivotal moment in my life, it was a really big deal to have her familiar voice there with me. It'll be hard to think about not having that in my life anymore. So it was an honor to have someone so full of love as a grandmother, someone who had such a powerful influence on me. So Mimi, I still do, and I always will love you more than all the black holes in space.
I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say we're going by age or not, but I think we're going by age, so I'm revealing who's the oldest and who's the youngest. Anna, if you'll come forward.
I gotta move this down on the short one, even in heels. Good morning. A person's life is often valued by the legacy that it leaves, the accomplishments, the achievements, and the notion of leaving the world changed after having been in it. Many times this is summarized by one's career, vocation, or cause that they championed. My grandmother didn't win any Nobel Peace Prize, although she probably could have. She didn't run any major corporations, although she most certainly could have. She didn't author any books, although she could have written hundreds. She didn't organize or run any movements for political or governmental change, although she definitely could have. Her career lived inside her kitchen, her living room, and in the walls of her home. It was written in letters and emails and rested on the other end of the phone. It was wrapped up in care packages and in infamous parties. Her career was her family. She poured every talent, every skill, every brilliant thought into building a people group, a strong, intelligent, brave, courageous group of people that we know as family. Her first round were her 3 children that have brilliantly been deemed the Dimmel trifecta. 3 siblings who would walk through creative ventures together, career moves, raising families, and in the more recent years of life, facing life-altering diseases together. Side by side, these 3 held hands and walked through hell and back together. Always and forever, family came first. But they didn't come up with this on their own. This was taught, crafted, and molded into them by their mom. This standard was then poured into a new generation of children, 8 loud, creative, boisterous children. A cousin group notwithstanding the likes of the Jackson 5 or some other super talented family group, we genuinely believed we could do anything and be the gosh darn best at whatever it was we wanted to try. And we didn't turn out too shabby, I might add. If you need an engineer, we got one. You need a doctor, we got one. You need a New York journalist, we got one. You need a brilliant marketing mind, we got one of those. You need a savvy internet mind, we got one. You need a recording artist, musician, we got one. You need a published writer, hairstylist, mother of 4, that's me. I can brag, it's my speech. We got one. And if this sounds like a serious group of people, don't you worry. One of the youngest of our bunch has got you covered. Last but not least, we have a fantastic bartender to keep the party going at all times. Whatever you need, this group will rise to the occasion and get the job done, because we're Dimmels. And by God, Dimmels are a great group of people. But us cousins share one common standard of belief. Family is the most valuable thing you have. And family always comes first. Watching that core group of siblings, our parents, that shaped us into a strong bunch. For me personally, it provided a foundation for my own core sibling group of 2. Without probably even being aware, my brother and I are continuing this legacy. Through career highs and lows, divorce and heartbreak, all the joys and pains of parenthood, my brother and I are a tight pair. When a tough decision needs to be made or the most exciting moment is transpiring, we are each other's first call. Outside of my brother, my cousins are an extended sibling group, pseudo-siblings, and the 8 of us have this unspoken bond that's unique to us. And the older we grow, and as each of us face our own sets of challenges in life, the death of a parent, the loss of grandparents, divorce, career changes, or moments when we have to buck culture and just embrace who we are. The legacy of family that was set before us now holds us all together. And we face these challenges head on with a tenacity and a resilience that takes us by the hand, pulls us up, and charges us to march onward. The legacy behind Mimi is a strong people group. If family was Mimi's career, she mastered it. She built a tough, brave, gritty, free-thinking, world-changing group of people. Thank you, Mimi, for using all of your talent, skill, and intellectual brilliance to cultivate this family. We love you.
you younger ones are going to have to follow. You have to follow each other. That's like having to, follow a child or a dog or something. So you all are amazing. You're amazing. Catherine? Oh, video. She's coming by video.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine. I'm Suzanne's daughter, and I'm third in the Dimmel grandchild lineup today to speak. If my travel obligations have gone according to schedule, then I am probably currently in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, a place my grandmother never visited, but undoubtedly read all about. She loved reading. She was a voracious reader who loved learning about new countries and new cultures. And although I think she'd definitely take issue with my absence today, I'm reasonably certain that she'd appreciate the fact that I chose an interesting, if not a little bit dramatic reason to not be there. So I spent a lot of time with my Mimi growing up. She had a flair for the dramatic, and I joked with her once that that flair for the dramatic was the reason I had chosen to pursue a career in cable news. That was the only possible career I could come up with that would keep me entertained on a daily basis the way that she had when I was growing up. It's hard to fathom how my life would have turned out without her impact. She was the product of a bygone age, but limitations and social convention never seemed to, have much of an impact. She marched to the beat of her own drum. She did as she wanted, pretty much whenever she wanted, and she showed me what it was to be a strong and creative and powerful woman. And she did it all while exhibiting this kind of class and grace that, was just unique to her. She was more than my rock and my confidant. She was, she's the voice that I hear in my head when I'm motivating myself to be brave and when I'm soothing myself after disappointment or when I'm celebrating something I've worked hard to achieve. I wanted to share a story that I shared on Facebook right after she passed that I think exemplifies the way that she's forever impacted my life. I was kind of an anxious 8-year-old who never really could sleep. I had a lot of problems with insomnia. And I spent a lot of nights at Mimi's house when I was young. That felt like the safest place and kind of my happy place. But even there, I had a hard time sleeping. So I remember one time I wandered into her room at like 3 a.m. and, woke her up and said, I just can't sleep. And she asked, why can't you sleep? And I told her, well, I can't stop worrying about all of these questions I have about life. And she was like, what do you have to worry about life? And I said, well, I asked myself, like, what is the meaning of life? What am I here for? What is the purpose of all of this? And she laughed and said, you are way too young to be having a midlife crisis. But she very calmly explained to me that the way that she looked at life was that life was just a roller coaster. It's sometimes scary, sometimes exciting, sometimes disappointing, sometimes suspenseful, invigorating, but most importantly, in the scheme of things, it is 30 seconds. It is a blip. My little 100 years on this earth are just a blink of an eye. So it's going to be over before I know it. And the important thing is to recognize that and get everything I want to get in, all the experiences that I want to have, to do those experiences, pursue those experiences, throw my hands in the air, throw my head back and scream and enjoy the ride. And so after hearing this, I thought, that makes so much sense. And that's who she was. She was someone who knew not to sweat the small stuff. And I really think she spent most of her life doing that, enjoying the ride. She used to say, it'll all be over before you know it. Just enjoy the ride. And so since that night, I think I'm really a champion sleeper. I can sleep through anything. I haven't really had trouble with insomnia since. And it really gave me and my life kind of a focus and a purpose, and it made me feel like I understood what this was about. So I guess even though Mimi's ride has ended, I feel at peace because I will carry her with me on my ride, and I will treasure her memory always. And for that, I'm incredibly thankful. Thank you.
You know, I don't really think that any of this is particularly challenging for any of us to really say any of these things, because Mimi had such a strong personality. I think every one of us probably has a million different things that we could say about her from a million different angles. And since I've been witnessing everybody else kind of cover, you know, the good, nice, serious, wonderful side, if you knew Mimi, with a strong personality comes, you know, like all sorts of different angles of the pendulum. It swings very wide. But I'll just give you a couple stories that I always thought was funny. I had some serious stuff to say, but that's all. I mean, Jonathan did such a great job with that video and everything. But one of them was just, this is Mimi for you. I received a package. She was always calling me, always, like every week I get a call from her, and every day I get an email from her. We all know the classman@juno.net or whatever. I mean, that appeared. I had to do a spam filter at one point in time. Sorry, Mimi. And I did change my email address one time too, and I didn't tell her for about 6 months or years. But anyways, it was my 21st birthday, and I was sitting down for dinner, and she calls up, and I said, Mimi, she said, I want to sing you happy birthday. And she did, and I said, thank you so much. I'm just about to get my food. Let me call you back when I'm done. And she goes, well, did you get the package that I sent you? And I said, well, yes, I did. And so I had received a package earlier that day that was a little interesting. It contained 52 Take 5 chocolate bars. 52, okay. A package of great-looking gray. Now, I was 21 years old this time. This is gray hair dye. And then the third thing that it included was X-Lax, like a laxative kit. I appreciated the chocolate bars, and the other things I appreciated because that's what I love so much about Mimi. The thing about her was that I've always kind of considered myself to be kind of a little bit of a black sheep. And there's always been kind of a weird side of me. My mom, my dad, I've got both that inside of me. But then there's me, which has kind of always been a wild horse. And my mom and my dad trained me to get a lot of that wild horse out of me. I mean, they're the ones that really, really trained me. But Mimi, what she did for me is she made me realize it's okay that you might feel a little different inside than everyone else does. So I was sitting down and I said, well, Mimi, I gotta go. Let me call you right back. And she goes, well, no, let me explain to you why I got you these presents. Because now hold on one second. It's your birthday, and my birthday is one day before yours, so give me a second. So, you know, in those years, you could not refuse the memes. So I'm sitting there, my friends are sitting there, and she goes, well, did you get the Take 5 bars? And I said, yes. And she said, well, I thought you'd think that was neat because Dave Brubeck wrote a song called Take 5, which is an odd time signature, and I know you're a drummer and you like odd time signatures. I went, well, okay, yeah. Still thinking in my head, 52? Where did she get 52 bars? It was this massive box. And then she said, and then I thought you could maybe move back from Boston and come work at the Truman Library and dress up as an impersonator of Harry Truman because you look just like him. So you could do the gray hair and you could work as Harry Truman. And I'm thinking, I'm at the Berklee College of Music, an aspiring rock star at that time in my head, and I'm like, yeah, maybe I should change my career path and become Harry Truman. But the last thing that I'll never forget is she goes, I said, well, what about the laxatives that were in the box? And what was up with that? She goes, Oh, well, I thought you'd think that was fun. Fun? And then she goes, oh, and I won't name which relative, but she said, ex-relative, oh, I've got to tell you about how successful ex-relative's colonoscopy just was. Mimi, I'm going to dinner now. I love you very much. Goodbye. Mimi made it okay for me to be me, and there's more things than I could possibly say from a very personal level, because she was so family-oriented, and if you were in that Mimi vacuum, it's something that no one could ever possibly recapture or experience. It was an entirely unique universe unto itself. She was, and she was just another great, awesome, amazing, ridiculous addition to this awesome family that I'm a part of. So that's what I have to say. I have more stories, but I could just go on forever. So.
Okay, Scott, good luck.
I am definitely going to need that look. How did I get the headlining spot of this show? Amongst going after 5 other performers who are just ridiculously good at it. All right, well, here we go. I'm Scotty. According to Mimi, my name was Scotty Waddy Doodah Day. Which is a great name when you're a kid. She named me that after a song that went zippity doo dah, zippity a, my oh my. Yeah, what a wonderful day. So anyway, which was great when I was a kid. I loved that name. I thought it was amazing. But as I got older, and you start bringing girlfriends to family parties, and she comes up to you and says, hey there, Scotty Waddy Doodah Day, or hey there, Mr. Doodah. Mr. Doodah? I'll explain later. Speaking of performers, I mean, Mimi was the greatest performer of all time in everything she did. From the piano to the way that she prepared and organized food on your plate. It was always colorful and bright and always tasted to perfection. Now I used to eat I still eat very fast, what am I saying? I eat very fast, and normally I'll focus in on the meat and kind of leave the sides by the wayside. Mimi performed for me to tell me how to eat one time. She'd always say, Scotty, now you take a little bite of this, little bite of that, little bite of this, little bite of that. Just like that. Mimi was always the greatest at throwing a party. All of her parties were great. And I mean, the 4th of July parties would get a little out of hand. Cops would show up. She'd find the youngest of age women to go up and show up and flirt with the cops and, well, there's nothing going on here. And then she'd give them her award-winning French bread, which I'm surprised no one has talked about yet. That bread was amazing. You could eat an entire loaf of bread guilt-free because, well, there was no gluten-free diet at that point either.
Butter and some tasty.
Parquet, man, parquet. Just globs of it. Anyway, but the one party that really comes to mind is we're going to have a lot of people at the house, and we didn't really have a space for everyone. So Mimi moved all the furniture to the sides of the house, put down blankets. I believe this was after Bria was born. And she had a luau serving chips and salsa, tacos, and award-winning French bread. Which, you know, people still talk about this party. She stood there proudly at the door, giving everyone lays as they walked in. Everyone got laid that day. She was the greatest grandmother. just the greatest grandmother. She was the best to have at that time period. The 80s and the 90s. Like, now you got 10-year-old kids sitting in big boy, big girl, like, booster seats in a car. You know, back then, they just strapped me in at 6 years old, and I was good to go. Well, I loved Library Day. Main reason why, not for the books. I am dyslexic, so reading was very hard up until a certain point. But for the car rides there, she'd load all of us grandkids into that giant, like, Caprice Classic boat of a car, V8 engine, and we'd take all the back roads where all the hills were, and she would just floor that thing. And we would just go, and like, she'd go, whoopee, kids! Now, she probably learned this from my grandfather, who did this as well for us, but like, he was more controlled about it. I don't think she knew how much like power was underneath that accelerator. But man, did we fly. I think one time it was just me in there, and the show Knight Rider, she'd be like, look, Scotty, just like Turbo Boost. I'm gonna wrap this up here in a second, but I remember during their 50th wedding anniversary, all of us kids were supposed to speak, and I was really bashful and shy at 10. Like, you wouldn't know this one-on-one, but to talk to a crowd like this, that was just terrifying to me. So of course I get up there and supposed to say something, and I just kind of look at my feet. Hey, congratulations on 50 years. I don't even remember what I said. Mimi comes to me later, and she says, you're one of the youngest and the cutest. You should have just looked at us and said, Mimi and Ba, I love you more than the universe and all the black holes in space. And everybody would have said, aww. She was right. Well, Mimi, I am no longer scared. So to Mimi and Ba, congratulations on your 50 years. And congratulations on your next adventure. I love you more than the universe and all the black holes in space. Thank you.
Let's stand and sing together. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things and keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you always. Amen. We're going to invite you to be seated just for a little bit more as we watch this recessional video together.
Though I
Please stand. And may the God of all grace and glory go with you from this place. May the power of Jesus Christ and his good news remind you that life is eternal. And may the Spirit that connects us all together continue to walk with you, so that those to whom loves a stranger in this world may find in each of you most generous, generous friends. In the name of God, with Christ and Holy Spirit. Amen.